Good evening. I have 6:30, and I'll call the meeting to order. So the first item on the agenda is a presentation by Jeff Beckler of Zimmerman Properties about a new housing project near 53rd and Rock Road. Mr. Beckler.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Council, for the time this evening. I am Jeff Beckler with Zimmerman Properties. We're based out of Springfield, Missouri. We've got two phases of multifamily here in town. Broadstone Villas 1 and Broadstone Villas 2. It's been a while, so we're trying to do, those two assets are doing really well, so we're trying to do a third phase. As you're probably aware, affordable housing is in dire need in many communities across the country, and that's primarily what Zimmerman does. I'd say 99% of what we do is affordable housing. And working with Ty, and I know he just retired, and been working with Ted, and found a site like the mayor said off of 53rd and Rock Road. Seems to be a really good site. Ty and Ted seem to like the location, and wanted to go through what we're proposing, the tax credit application process with the state, just for anyone that is not familiar with it, just a chance to ask questions, and I can try to answer them as best as I can. And so we'll just kind of get started, and feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions that you just want to propose right away. So that first page is our site layout. For our application, we have to engage our architect. Our architect has been working with us for probably 25 years, and this is what he does, mainly affordable housing. So I think the site really lays out well. You'll see that it's 3 buildings. We've got a clubhouse. I'll kind of touch on some of the amenities in a little bit for the sake of time. It kind of abuts I say reserve. I don't think it's technically a reserve, but kind of that ditch area in the back. There's some good buffer there between our proposed use, and I believe those townhomes right there, Ted, to the east.
Yeah, single family.
Okay. Yeah. But there's a good buffer there, and we're also proposing possible duplexes. Sorry, a possible walking path on that eastern side where he's kind of that dotted line, which would be kind of a cool feature right there. So that's kind of what we're thinking on layout, and obviously we would adhere to all your guys' codes and parking and all of that. And I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. That next slide is just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea of an elevation, a colored elevation. So I had the architect kind of put something together. Now, this is preliminary, obviously, so aesthetics might change a little bit, but be fairly close to this. And again, adhering to all of your guys' codes and regulations and things of that nature. Zimmerman, we were formed in 2000. We are, like I said, we're in Springfield, Missouri, family owned. Zimmerman's, Vaughn being our founder, Rebecca, his wife, Justin, his son, and Justin, his wife. Great group of guys. Matt Zimmerman, also his son. He heads up he's a president of construction. So truly is family owned, and they are a great family. Lots of experience, over 30 years. We've developed 100 new multifamily properties in about 14 states now, containing about 10,000 units. Our property management arm, Wilhoit Properties, we manage, I think we're close to 18,000 units now. So very experienced on the management side as well. We also build. So the hot term is vertically integrated. We develop, construct, and manage our own GC, and been doing that a long time as well. So it's nice to keep it as a one-stop shop. Very experienced in Kansas as well. Like I said, even in Bel Aire, we are experienced. Try not to dwell too much on this. A lot of experience in the 9% tax credit program. So the program, if anybody's not aware, I'll try to go through quickly. It's the tax credit equity. It allows developers to keep the rents more affordable. It's not a subsidized development. It's not Section 8 or anything like that. I like to refer to it as workforce housing. And all the tenants must go through a screening process, credit, criminal, employment, and that's an annual basis. Zero tolerance for criminal violations. We have to stay in compliance with the state agency there in Topeka. We have to stay in your guys' compliance, and we have to stay in compliance with our investors. Since this is all private risk and it's not publicly subsidized, there are investors in it that are involved. And so they've got their own regulations. The state has their regulations. And most importantly, you guys do. So we have to adhere to all of that. Falling out of compliance is our biggest worry, because not to get in too much into the weeds, but if investors are seeing we're out of compliance and it's repeated and they start asking for those tax credits back, that's when that private risk comes into motion. And my guys are on the hooks for millions of dollars. So our number one goal is staying compliant with everyone involved and making sure that everyone's happy. The timeline to the state will be May 10th. It's probably the most competitive thing I've ever done, and I was a sports guy, still am, but this is like a competition. So we're scored against all other applications in the state, and it's a point scoring system. So we're not just competing with what the state agency says or wants. We're competing with deals in Topeka, Kansas City, Kansas, Shawnee, all of it. And I mean, I could find a site right here. Another developer could find a site just across the street. And because of the way the points are scored, we might lose out and they would get their development, or vice versa. So it really comes down to a matter of feet and how you structure the deals. They will announce awards in July of this year. They'll stack the scores and make sure everybody's kosher on what they're proposing. And the highest scores went out. They'll probably award like probably 12 to 15 developments across the state. So fingers crossed for Bel Aire. And Ted wanted me to talk to you guys because there's an industrial revenue bonds element to this. And it truly is just for the scoring. So the state agency, they like to see that the community is supportive, most importantly, city councils like yourself, and they give you an avenue to request industrial revenue bonds from a city. And what that does is it just triggers the sales tax. I'm not the financial guy in our group. I know enough to be dangerous, but I've asked a lot of questions. And what I believe it comes down to is it triggers that state sales tax. We aren't modeling too much sales tax relief in our financial model because, again, I said we're vertically integrated. So we wholesale a lot of our building materials. So we'll buy in Missouri most of the time. So the sales tax, it's really not, I really think the state should probably do something different because it's really not a vast sales tax that we're getting relief on. And I believe it's really just a way to see that the community and city councils are supportive of the project. And if you guys have questions on that at the end, we can talk more about that. I'll try to keep it moving along. We're proposing 48 units of family housing, an even split of 24 2-bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. The rents will range from $490 to $1,108 for 2 bedrooms and $546 to $1,260 for 3 bedrooms. We're not seeking any tax abatement relief or anything of that nature. We're going to be a partner in paying taxes, knock on wood, this gets approved for the next 40 plus years. The rents are kind of set with Sedgwick County's area median income. And that's how we keep it really workforce housing, because we'll set our rents for 60% of that median income. Those rents will be a little bit higher. Those might be your first year teachers. Those might be first year firefighters. I'm just speaking of who we see renting in the affordable housing. 30%. So that would be like your 490 for a 2-bedroom. So that's, your service workers. It really tries to hit all income bands, going from, a kid starting out at 19 and serving at Applebee's and just trying to work his way up. First year teachers, I can attest that my wife was a first year teacher 23 years ago, 22 years ago, and we could have totally qualified to live in affordable housing such like this.
So are these ranges then like a sliding scale based on their income?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. And the way they set it up, that first year teacher, if there's a 30% unit available, that first year teacher or whoever making that 40,000, 35,000 would not be able to take that 30% unit. I mean, that's the way they structure those. Amenities, we always do a nice amenity package with picnic area and playgrounds and a fitness area, a nice leasing office. We put washers and dryers, new washers and dryers in each unit, community center. We do a nice community space in the clubhouse for activities, because there are more activities than you would think. We started doing dog parks. We've noticed across the states that people are requesting those. So that's kind of a cool little thing. And that's it. That's any questions? I kind of breezed through that kind of fast. So yeah, so I really appreciate your time and I welcome any questions.
I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
You're talking about the rent rates on these apartments, but how big are they? How many square feet?
Okay, good question. Yeah, our 2 bedrooms are generally about 1,000 square feet. Our 3 bedrooms, probably about 1,200 square feet, depending on the site. The 2 bedroom might be 900, the 3 bedroom might be 1,100, but it's around there. Yeah.
Okay. And you said you're not worried about sales tax because you're going to import the building materials. That doesn't do much for our local economy.
Well, my point to that is that the state agency sets this up where it triggers that sales tax. But the way most of these developers are wholesale type buyers, and so they'll buy their items. We always try to buy local, but if we have, because we've got like a 3-acre, I think, shop where we store future materials. So that was my point, that a lot of developers are buying bulk materials elsewhere, but at the same time, we're going to explore all avenues of where we buy our materials.
Okay. I just remembered one other question I had. You're referring to these other locations you have there, the what, Broadview?
Broadstone 1 and 2.
Broadstone 1 and 2. Where are those located?
Just to the north. I think about a quarter mile as the crow flies to the north.
To the north of what?
To the north of 53rd, sorry. Just directly north of the site.
Okay, they're not the units on Lysee.
No.
Okay.
They're over there by the school, just almost right, just behind and to the west of the school.
And that is Lysee Street.
Lysee.
The say.
Let's say, okay.
That's what I was told.
I asked that because if you read our police reports, that's where most of the police reports come from.
Oh, is that right?
Is that area of town. So
Okay. I'll check into that with, and again, I'm 10 yards from property management, and I'll definitely look into that. We take that stuff very seriously, and we generally don't let those, depending on the severity of whatever happens, we don't allow those people to continue on. So I'll bring that up with property management.
if they're your tenants, then the screening process isn't working real well is what I'm.
Okay. I'll get with property management on that for sure.
So this property, I think, is currently zone C1.
I believe so.
Looks like it's a pretty prime place for a commercial.
Mhm.
Have you looked at any other areas in Bel Aire to do this development?
I can't remember where it was, Mr. Mayor. We're just been kind of at the mercy of the sellers and, you know, what they would like the land to be in the future. And a lot of times you fall through on those avenues with sellers. One of the hardest parts about my job is the timeline and the land to get it. We have to be under contract for our preliminary application in January, but fingers crossed you get awarded. You won't close until hopefully January of 2025.
Yeah.
And so it's a hard hurdle for me. And sometimes sellers just don't want to play that waiting game. And I totally get it. Excuse me. So this one, all saying that, he was willing to work with us on the timing, and that's kind of how I was led to it. But, you know, should the deal not get awarded, we can always explore other options. It's tough sometimes.
Well, I know there's demand for this type of housing, or this income level of housing. I
Yes,
just
sir.
was concerned about that location. I mean, everything else I don't have concern with, but
Okay.
I'm just concerned with that location. But
Yeah.
you're kind of locked into that to make this May application. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't need to be rezoned by that May application.
But you're locked into that location.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And, you know, we'll try to start that rezoning process. And if the city is not supportive, that, you know, that's what the city wants. And we'll just try to find a different area. But, you know, hopefully we can get over that hurdle and get it rezoned for
Okay.
sure.
So Jeff, it's kind of my question on this. So next Tuesday we'll have it's a IRB, but there's no exemptions or anything. So it's more of a resolution of
Mhm.
support, pretty much. This council passes or doesn't pass that. What's you might have touched on this. What's the next step? What are we?
Mhm.
Then you'll get awarded, or maybe get awarded.
Yeah.
Let's go through that one more time.
Yeah, if I understand your question right, so like if next week there's a no vote, what would be the next steps?
Yeah, let's do yes vote first.
Yes vote. So we would get that resolution for that item, and it's truly a point scoring item. I believe it's worth 5 points, and so we are always seeking every point we can get, and we would submit that with our application. And it just makes us more competitive against those other applications across the state that I touched on. You're trying to get any point that you can to make you most competitive that you can be. Should it not get voted yes next week, we'll still submit our application without those 5 points and just see where we shake out. Because you know, I work hard on these things, and I like to see just exactly what will happen. You've had applications that I don't think this has a chance, and then they get awarded. So we can just see what happens after Tuesday. Is that kind of answer to?
Correct. I just wanted to frame the discussion, because this is a little different than most IRBs or any other development you see. Is, you know, that it kind of starts here and then restarts the whole process with zoning and plotting, and all the other stuff comes after. So I wanted you to have the time to explain the process, and then them to ask questions as well. So I appreciate you being here.
I did have a quick question.
Yeah.
So the existing units that you guys have, phase 1 and 2, how many units do you have currently? So you're talking about adding 48 units with this proposed.
And I believe,
How much do you currently have under management?
I believe, are you talking about the first two?
The ones in Bel Aire.
Yeah, I believe they're both 48 units.
Gotcha.
There might be one. The second phase might be 50, but you know,
So pretty similar size to each of the first two
very
phases.
very
Okay,
similar. Yeah.
that helps.
Those are the ones to the north, not the duplexes.
No, they're apartments.
Just the
Correct.
apartments.
Yeah. We don't generally. We have done duplexes before I was with Zimmerman, but we don't normally do duplexes. Yeah.
Can you explain this 9%
Yeah.
for versus other low-income housing?
Yeah. So the IRS, it's section 42 of the IRS code, a 9% tax credit. And then they've also got a 4% tax credit. And I was not a finance major, but the easiest way I can describe it is that the 9% credits that are sold to these big corporations, Fortune 500 companies that have a lot of tax liability. And so President Reagan and his administration came up with a way, well, if you want some relief from your tax liability, buy these tax credits. When you buy those tax credits, it's an influx of equity into housing. And that's how we can keep those rents lower. The 4%, they're generally, those are truly bond deals. And so you'll have millions and millions of bonds. The 9% credit, just that discrepancy from 4 to 9 is that much more equity into a development. The 4% are just massive deals, 200 units, 300 units. And so they need those extra bonds. And again, I apologize, I'm not a finance major, but that's about the easiest way I can break it down. The tax credits are just sold to these major investors that have tax liability, and it's really a great program to help try to keep rents lower.
What are the differences in the qualifications as far as?
Between, oh, okay, like so I understand, like a subsidized housing versus a 9%?
Right.
Right. So that's a good question. The subsidized, I mean, it's unfortunate to say, but they're just not regulated. And then that's why you see a lot of problems with them. There's no private risk, it's government housing. And that's when a lot of bad things happen. And I'm not saying across the board, everything's bad there's a need for housing everywhere. But this affordable housing is private risk, heavily regulated in a good way. We all don't like being regulated too much, but this is regulated in a good way. And so that's your major difference between like a subsidized development versus a 9% development is quality, standards, and keeping up with standards. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question after that line. The first two phases, were those built with this 9%, or how were those?
Yes, 9%.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they used the same program and built
Correct.
those with it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we do a few 4% deals, bigger deals. They're really tough to make pencil. So not just for us, but for all developers. So the 9% has kind of been our sweet spot the last few years.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Beckler?
I appreciate you all and look forward to next week.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
laying out what your plans are. So
What's that?
thank you for laying out what your plans were.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next item is the park improvements, and we have preliminary sketches for Eagle Lake Park and Skyview Park.
Yeah, quick public service announcement. We're live on YouTube. Facebook is giving us some fits. So I shared the link to YouTube on Facebook. Hopefully they can just click the link and view us on YouTube, and we'll get that smoothed over by next week. Like I said, the second part of our agenda is park improvements. Met with Brian and Marty for a few weeks now, and we're kind of looking at in 2024 we looked at Eagle Lake Park, and their playground equipment was kind of deteriorating to a point where we needed to replace it. We put in $100,000 into this park, and now we're ready to go out for bid. But I wanted to present some of the ideas tonight. 120,000. I'm sorry. So this is the way Eagle Lake Park currently looks. As you guys know, if you've been here for a few years, bumblebees tend to, or not bumblebees, sand bees tend to burrow in the sand, and it's kind of a mess everywhere you walk there because the sand just gets everywhere on the sidewalks. So part of our budget is to do an improvement with actual safety server, like a turf safety surface material that gets rid of the sand. Also, to purchase a new playground equipment for the park itself. This picture up here is just a rendering. We're going to keep the same swing set because there's not enough room in the budget. To give any, I know I'm a dad too, and I build or buy a swing set, and it seems really inexpensive, but all these swing sets that municipalities buy have to be better quality and more commercial side of things, and they're about $30,000. As you guys know, doing the safety or turf is also expensive. It's about $50,000 to do what we're wanting to do. Also, we've noticed a lot of mothers sit at those and fathers sit at the park benches. We'd like some type of shade over those park benches, so we incorporate that as well into our design. The biggest issue we're having and what we would like your guys' comments on is the sand volleyball court. Really, we can't put safety surface around the playground and keep the sand volleyball court without sand getting into the safety surface and really compromising its effectiveness. Eagle Lake Park's a unique drainage situation. All the water comes off the parking lot right through all the sand and into the lake, or I guess a pond over there. So as you can tell, if we were to keep the volleyball court, the sand would be washed onto our brand new surface. How do we approach that? And this is something where we can have a quick discussion. My initial response is to do a survey of the surrounding area of some sort. And I have a little mock-up of it where we survey the residents saying, hey, listen, the budget allocates $100,000 for improvements. Part of this endeavor would be to remove the sand volleyball court to help with drainage and other issues, give them a little bit of taste of what it might become, and then ask simple questions like, how often do you visit Eagle Lake Park? What amenities do you typically engage in when visiting Eagle Lake Park? Just some broad information. How satisfied you are with the current state? I imagine we're getting a lot of unsatisfied. How satisfied are you with the current state of the volleyball court? And then if the sand volleyball court were to be removed to improve drainage and keeping from causing problems to the new playground surface, how would you feel about this decision? This way, we can bring you the bids for the new park with also some neighborhood input as well. Really, there's no other option other than to not do safety surface. So that's why I'm kind of in the between even surveying. However, I thought maybe if it only took a little bit of time to post it, we'd get some responses on it and better inform you of what the neighborhood feels. There is another option, but it won't be this fiscal year, would be somehow moving the sand volleyball court if we see a very high response for it. There is some room over on the east side of there, over here, but then we also talked we'd have some of the same problems of transfer of sand. Now, what would go in place of the volleyball court, because you would have a pretty nice triangle rectangle sidewalk. We were thinking that Marty and the guys could do something fun with a tricycle, basically racetrack around there. So I think we could incorporate and do some interesting things with that area, even without the sand volleyball court. So really, we just wanted to kind of get your opinion on it. I know it's just replacing a swing or a play set and putting some safety surface down, but I didn't know if you guys wanted to go ahead with the survey or if there's no other option, just remove the volleyball court.
Well, I'm not a big fan of that type of a survey.
Okay.
Because the responses are generally those that are most interested in the subject, and everybody else kind of leave it alone, and then they're dissatisfied with the decisions because it's not a cross section of the citizens. It's just those individuals. Uh, uh, I was just wondering, on that volleyball court, can you put a mat surface on it? I mean, I've seen those around. I don't know if we have any of those around here, but
And kind of here we go with how much over budget do you want to
right,
go?
yeah, I know. Yeah,
And
I knew
that
that
was
was
our
coming.
discussion in our meeting is why don't we just put some safety surface on the volleyball court, but we might add, what do you think, Brian?
Really, for that kind of a surface?
Sport,
Okay.
sport court. That's
Okay.
what we're talking. So
That could also be used for basketball. That could be multi-use.
But then you have to take the net down if you're going to play something else on there.
Yeah.
And depending on how competitive you are, that mat may not be nearly as good as the sand. You'll hit your knees and get burns and whatever else on the other surfaces.
It would be nice to have the bees go away. That's a challenge at that park, the sand bees. But that volleyball court is used a lot. And actually, the sand is an attraction for the kids, is my observation. My kids like playing in the sand, and I see lots of kids taking their sand toys down there to play in the sand. So I'm a little reluctant to just completely remove the sand, especially with a $50,000 surface for the playground. Can we just replace the playground equipment and leave all of the sand?
we can.
There would be ADA concerns.
What other surfacing other than sand? Other than that, is there another option?
I look to my expert over here.
The next step after sand would be loose rubber fill, which is about the same thing as sand. It's going to be a maintenance headache. It's going to get all over the sidewalk. It's going to lose it. We have to keep adding to it. It is ADA accessible.
Kill the bees.
We had that over at Resurrection, didn't we? We took it all out, didn't we?
It gets tracked something awful.
Because it tracks everywhere.
It does.
All the way through the school it got tracked.
Yeah.
So people will be taking it home.
Now you guys are running to our roadblock.
I got
It's
a different topic. You were talking about building something for the people that were sitting there. Why aren't we planting trees along the south and west sides of that? They're a long ways from trees there.
it can be an option as well.
Well, it's much more eco-friendly.
Sure.
Good point.
Is the picnic area and coverage going to stay in this plan? Not going to touch that?
Yes.
Is anything about the playground equipment itself ADA compatible? That's in my mind, that's the biggest drawback to the sand is the ADA compatibility and, making sure everyone can use it. But if we're saving $50,000 on the safety surfacing, I would wonder if we might be able to add some features in other parts of that facility that, would be ADA compatible.
I want to talk
So-
about drainage too.
Well, let's stay on the ADA for a second. I got a question related to that, but I do want to hear about your drainage question as well. So kind of tell us, what is the rule on ADA? Do you have, everything has to be ADA compliant if you upgrade, or does the ADA requirement say you have to have something that's available? And I get that. And I think we do in Bel Aire Park, if I'm not mistaken.
Central.
But and Central Park as well?
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't know the rule, so I'm just trying to find out what is the rule so that we,
Well, you're probably all right until somebody challenges you.
well, and I understand that,
Might
but
live in that area.
but it would be better to find out. And I don't know, Maria, if you looked into that or know the answer to that, maybe you need to do a little homework on that.
I can look into that, Mayor Benaj. I see here, I'm looking at the ADA compliant materials for playgrounds, and it's saying that pea gravel and sand are not ADA compliant materials. Then it says that they can be used in conjunction with other safe surfaces, but I can look into that further.
So, and I'm not trying to say, don't make this ADA compliant. I'm just wondering, is there a requirement that this park has to be ADA compliant if we have other ADA compliant parks in the city? And I just want to understand what the rule is so we know what the landscape looks like. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. All right, your question.
Okay, I'm wondering why we can't easily make the drainage go south like most everything else in that area goes south instead of towards the lake.
Marty? Better up.
I can't remember. I haven't been over there in a long time, but
Well, that's a neighborhood over there.
well, but there's also some, I don't know, even if it went down
Drainage
and
ditch.
there's a drainage ditch over there someplace.
The drainage is back to the south, so it's gonna be back in the tree area back there. It would take a lot of grading to get it all back that way, the way the ground is right now.
How about a pipe?
You still gotta have a low spot to get water to go into the pipe to
Well,
the drainage area.
The biggest problem is it's coming off the parking lot, right? Everything else should mostly soak into the ground.
I'd have to look into it a little bit more. Honestly, I didn't look at that when we were out there at the drainage part of it.
And I think there's a curb and sidewalk.
There is a curb and sidewalk.
Does the water go up over it?
I believe the water right now is going from the volleyball court into the playground area. That's the way the water is flowing,
Not necessarily from the parking lot.
not from the parking lot. The parking lot is lower, everything's draining off the parking lot, it's going,
Storm sewer.
coming straight across.
Wait, back up. I heard storm sewer and I heard straight across. Where's it going from the parking lot? Does it go out to the street or does it go out in the park area someplace?
So from the parking lot itself, there is a
Yes.
storm drain there.
On the north side.
I believe that goes right into the lake area is where that is going.
Okay, but it's not going across the surface.
No.
So everything that's washing across the volleyball court is hitting the volleyball court or just that little bit of land to the west of it.
Correct.
And that's enough to wash sand?
And that's what,
That's enough water coming across there to wash sand?
it washes that sand right across that sidewalk into the playground area. That sidewalk from the volleyball court to the playground is usually covered in sand. Every week we go out there and have to blow everything off and maintain.
I can believe it's covered with sand, but I don't believe it's washing is my problem.
Well, it washes over and under it. You can see
Yes.
where, we've had to actually replace some of that
Are
concrete
you-
right
you-
there because of it.
Erodes. under
You
it.
send 20 kids out there and there'll be sand all over that sidewalk.
Oh,
I think that's the bigger issue with the sand and the playground is if it's in the volleyball court, it's going to be on the safety surfacing because kids are going to
Yeah.
play in the sand
Right.
and it will track over there and it will look terrible and make that safety surfacing way less functional.
And it'll wear on it.
It will definitely break
Where?
The parks that have both sand and safety surfacing, like those two do not play well nice together has been my experience. You shouldn't have both in the same park.
I believe if we wanted to keep the volleyball court, we move it, what was it, east behind the tree roll there, and then we do the safety surfacing and keep it like it is.
I was thinking maybe if you move the volleyball court, you'd move it north and separate it from the play area.
If there's any.
I mean, if anybody's playing volleyball, ought to be able to walk far enough to get over behind the trees, but I'm just,
The way I'm seeing this is if you're going to go through the expense and effort to relocate the volleyball court, why not make it a multi-surface use? So it could be basketball, pickleball, volleyball, instead of keeping the sand.
well, again, it comes back to the net. You got to be able to remove the net if you're going to play some other sport on there.
Well, it's $100,000 if you're going to do that. Right?
And who's responsible for that? I mean,
Yeah,
who would be
exactly.
responsible? Okay, one week we're doing volleyball, next week we're doing pickleball, next week we're.
Well, if you leave it up to the people using the park, they're going to be fighting over it.
Yeah.
We wanted to play volleyball. Well, we're playing basketball.
I agree with Mayor. I've been thinking about surveys a lot. We still get complaints 5 years later about the Woodlawn survey and the roundabout survey. So I wanted to touch on, you're going to this park at different times than I am because I never see anybody on the ball court, but I know you live over there. Do you see people in the
It's
evening?
the evenings.
Okay. I'd be okay with taking it out and just I liked your idea about the trike track and then in terms of the sand options, we've got a couple of other parks where we have sand options. So, and then in terms of the $16,000 shade structure, if we're leaving the covered picnic area, I mean, I'd be okay dropping that. Just sometimes I like to sit in the sun, and if we have both options, I would personally be okay with dropping that. So.
I do like the tri-park traffic circle idea. We've been to parks that have like full on traffic setups with stop signs and yield signs and all kinds of stuff for the kids to trike and bike around on. And that's really cool and really fun for the kids. So I think that'd be an amenity that would be unique to our area to have, which would be pretty cool.
So part of that survey, we were going to ask what the age group was in that area so we could determine what was actually being put in that park for that age group.
I think it's all ages and
If it's
it'll
gonna-
change.
If it's going to be a trike park, people are going to come from wherever they want to come from. They'll load this stuff up in their car and drive there.
And that's what we're thinking. We can create something unique in that park.
If you eliminate the volleyball court here, are there other options of volleyball courts in Bel Aire?
Rec center.
We have talked about doing it at the rec center, although space is a premium already.
Yeah, I was just saying, where are you gonna put it?
Existing park is.
Difficult at the rec center.
Sorry. Oh, difficult. Okay. Yeah. But we don't have one someplace else, do we? Yeah.
It's
Hey,
maybe
hey,
maybe a 2025 budget discussion. We can get some ideas of where we can put a sand volleyball court in Bel Aire and maybe propose installing one in 2025 if we remove it in 2024. Just to give you some options that way.
Is there room up there by the disc golf park? There's no parking though.
Yeah, that parking's kind of. Or we can.
Feels like the rec complex is the natural location. It's just the problem is what are you sacrificing? You have to take out that park that's there probably.
Which we have to have the park to have the camp.
Yeah. Can't do that.
We have to have the park for what?
For day camp.
Oh, day camp. Yes. Okay. Maybe we should put a trike park over there.
I'm sure nobody has the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do we know if it's the same people playing volleyball in this court all the time, or if there's quite a variety of folks? And I don't know.
I mean, I think that's what the survey was looking at,
Was hoping to
but
find
we're
out.
not sure.
Right.
We know that we have one enthusiastic resident that calls us a lot to replace the net and do maintenance of the park. And that's what kind of brought up the conversation.
So you know what the answer is if you ask them about.
You'll know that. I strongly agree
next meeting,
on that
so
one, I
leave
think. So it was more of a data collection recommendation. But as you can see, there's really no good answer with the volleyball court. So this discussion is designed so I can put together a formal bidding process so we can go out to bid for these improvements and submit something in front of you so we can accept a bid and get it done this year.
Is the sand volleyball court an expensive proposition, or is it fairly inexpensive? I mean, what are we looking
I
at?
wouldn't think so.
I meant Marty would volunteer for anything to build. I'm trying to avoid
get out
him
there and put it
doing
up.
that. So you're teeing him up right now. No, it's not. It's not the most expensive piece of park equipment you can do. Of course, you'd have to concrete or some sort of border to it, and then dump some sand in. And,
Yeah, it feels like we probably shouldn't design the future of the park around that specific amenity since it's so easy and low cost to relocate that.
I
To sand volleyball.
and I'm
Because it's just sand, right? It's just sand with a sidewalk around it.
Easy to put a trike park.
Concrete edge, yeah.
And so like
It can be
the fact that
replicated
it's
for low
there
cost.
shouldn't be
Right.
a reason to, design around it. If you had a, a tennis court there. We've seen what those cost, and
Yeah.
you might want to think really hard about relocating a tennis court.
So, and I'm kind of okay with that idea.
But I'm not
I
sure
hate
where
to
we
say-
would relocate it to.
yeah, I just hate to take away a volleyball court that's actively being used.
It's used and it's kind of unique for the area too. I don't know
And-
where else you can go do that in a
And I
public
don't
park.
know. And maybe there's another place we can do it, maybe not. But if we could do it, if we could move it and say, okay, it's not here, but we have one at this other location now, then maybe that would be much more palatable to those citizens who use it. I mean, I don't know if that would work or not, but I get the idea that you don't really want the sand there when you upgrade the playground equipment. It just doesn't make sense.
So Ted, on our master planning for parks, I know we looked at the rec complex, we looked at Central Park, and we looked at Bel Aire Park, right? Those were the three that were
The big three,
specifically
yeah.
identified and there was recommendations made. Does it make any sense to kind of relook at that and see if there's any area that they identified that we may be able to put a sand volleyball in one of those other parks that we had already sort of started planning for?
When we first met out there, Marty and I, Marty goes, we need to move the volleyball court over here, which is right there. I mean,
Yeah.
right there to
Just to the east.
see where the red arrow is, right there where
Right
Ted
there.
has his circle.
Yeah.
There's room for that volleyball court right there, away from the playground, downhill from it.
Would it make sense? Would you still get sand in the playground equipment?
Not if you move
Not
far
Not
enough
very
away.
much.
There's a tree line right there. Plus, the whole field is open all the way back to where dead end Parkwood.
So you've got a location there,
There's room.
That works.
There's room there.
and you'd be fine with it not sand damaging a new playground equipment. So is that what you're telling us?
That's my thought.
That would be your
Well,
recommendation.
And like at Bel Aire Park right now, there's two areas that are really far apart. There's the area with like the hippos, the Little Tykes hippo, and then there's the playground with the safety surfacing, and they're really far apart. And I don't think I ever see sand over on the safety surfacing from that
Okay.
sand pit.
Okay.
So there is a distance that's far enough. The sand
Well,
doesn't seem to travel.
if that works, I would say let's do that. If that worked, I was getting the impression that really wasn't a workable solution. But
That was my recommendation, but we just need you guys to say, yeah, go ahead and move it, or no, leave it like it is because it's already active like now.
So
Okay, I would go with moving it, and if we can't do something decent with that area, I'd put it back to grass before I'd get too worried about it.
That was our intent, is where the volleyball court would be, is that go back to grass and have some more green space there with the track around.
Okay.
Try to improve drainage when
Well,
you
and
do
you
that.
can get some more trees in there, which I want some trees.
Figure out how-
Right.
yeah,
Well,
Plant some
yeah.
trees.
figure out what we can do with the drainage. The playground guy did mention to do some drainage tile pipes, underneath the playground and try to get it.
Well, if it follows very close to that red line, you could do some work north of the playground, I would
So it
think.
doesn't sit in that low spot. That makes sense.
and that's an easy solution. But I guess if we take out the shelters or the sunshades, we might save a little money enough to relocate. But you might be prepared for it's going to go over budget if we build a new sand volleyball court over there or relocate it. We'll see. If Marty's guys, if we want to spend their time doing that, we can do that. But I just want to prepare you if, it might be over the allotted amount of money, and that's fine. How much, I'm not sure. We'll put pen to paper on it and report back to the council with our bids, and you'll make that determination. But this is good feedback, so we can actually go out and forbid on this item and get you some feedback.
Are we sure there's enough space there? Have we measured it?
We'll just,
And somebody's going to have,
But I mowed it, and it's more space than the volleyball court is.
Okay, I'm looking at it on the satellite view and trying to like visually move it over there, and it looks like,
Ted,
well, I was using the measure feature.
instead of us trying to design it, I assume you'd propose to have the playground company that's going to give us a quote on the equipment. Maybe their bid with concrete can include a stem wall for the sand volleyball court, and Marty's guys would just fill it with sand. I assume somebody's going to design it. Somebody will lay it out. Just make it a part of that proposal, and then we can take a look at it. It could even be an adder. It could be an adder to their proposal, so that we can decide whether or not we want to do it or not.
No, it's been good feedback. I appreciate it, and we'll take this and run with it.
Have we looked at any grants for any of this kind of stuff? I know playground grants, they seem to always have grants with them. I don't know why that is, but
Yeah.
it
So
seems
the
to be a
biggest
lot.
one is waste tire grant. We've gotten that a few times. The problem we have there is they accept applications in November, I believe. So
You're waiting too long.
yeah,
You gotta
yeah.
wait a long wait to do that.
We would have to do this in 25, and I don't think that would be the appropriate way.
Well, keep your ears
I'll keep
out
my
for
ear
that.
to
If
the
something
yeah.
something pops
Always
up.
looking for grants on that sort of
Right.
thing.
The next one on the list is the grant.
Well, yeah, that's the big one that we'll talk about now.
Okay.
So we did the easy one first, huh?
Yeah, I was going to say that was the easy one. If you remember, we have a lot of movement coming into Bel Aire, especially over near the Skyview addition. Look at all those and that's not very representative because a lot of the buildings have already been built in that area there. But as you remember, at the end of 2022, Andrew Reese donated the 3 lots that are in the red box there. Really pretty generous. He just said build a park there. There was no, according to the agreement, it was pretty basic. But as you know, it's been since 2022, so I thought we should at least start the process of this. The problem also, and Brian, you might be able to come to the podium and talk a little bit best on this because you and Ty really took this up.
So about a year ago, Ty sent out an RF request for proposal for Skyview Park. That's what this is showing a little bit. That was about a year ago. And there was interest from one group, but no proposals were turned in, 0. We began to visit with one of those interested people. It's actually the people that helped with our master plan. She had a group that put together of a playground company and a construction company. Well, I don't know what happened there. They did not submit a proposal. So we revisited that again at the end of the year last year. We sent out another request for proposal. We got one complete proposal back from a group out of Kansas City. And we've got some interest from a local playground construction company. Some very preliminary interest in another group out of Kansas City. So really, we didn't really get anything back except for one proposal back from that. And I think Ted can talk to you about where we're at. He's got some pictures to show you. So this here is from the group we actually got a proposal back from. So this was over at Skyview for a playground area, some landscaping, an open lot right there, number 12, with a little walking path. Number 1 is a shelter, and then the brown area is the playground. This is for ages 2 through 12. Parking area, landscaping, some electrical, because there's some street lights out there. No plumbing. We did talk about, doing water fountaining or something like that, but that is not included in this. So that's what this group right here is looking at. So that's the one proposal, complete proposal that we got back. And again, they're just estimates. The next photo is from another group out of Kansas City who's interested, but they want more information. They want it spelled out for them. They want to know exactly what we want. And that's just a concept picture they threw together of what the park could look like. This picture here is another concept that the local Wichita company provided for us. And they did give us some estimates. That's the playground area right there and the concrete, but that's all they do. They just do the playground portion. They don't do any grading. They don't do any electrical. They don't do the parking lot. They do the playground component only. So then that's kind of their layout right there. If you do see, look at that picture right there, there is lots of green space on both sides of that playground. That, you know, when we originally started talking about this thing with Ty, when I started talking about Ty, he wanted to see a little soccer field on one side. He wanted to see a sport court like we talked about a while ago on one side. And we started kind of brainstorming that with these folks, and that figure was going to push about $1.5 million to do all of that at this site. So we backed off of that real fast and are just focusing on the playground, which kind of has been the talk from the beginning, to add a playground to this community. So we really have got a little ways, but we just need some direction on what we want to proceed with. I mean,
What's the estimate on the
we do
playground?
have one proposal,
So-
and Ted can visit
Yeah.
with you about that.
So that's the most difficult part is, you know, the one that came in was about 700,000. And then we looked at just a regular playgrounds, about $300,000. And that's just for kind of what you see here.
Why is that so much more expensive than what we're doing at Eagle Lake Park for 100?
Cartons from scratch. And this is a lot bigger. This is a lot bigger footprint as well. And that's kind of where the conversation needs to probably start is, you know, this of course is about a $75,000 donation to the city with land. We need to probably act on a park of some sort. You need to set a limit, and then we tackle grants and whatnot to expand. So that's kind of was my idea, is start with just a park, and then we can expand slowly because there's a lot of room over there. And then it backs up to the reserve of Terra Verde, which you guys heard a lot about that. They're turning that into, or they're turning in that whole area as well into housing. So hopefully in the next 5 years, this park's going to be very well used on both sides of the park. Now, when we talk money,
Just to clarify, the reserve in Terra Verde cannot be developed. That there's an area right there that cannot be developed. Is that correct?
correct. There, it
So
got
it'll
it got
look like an
confusing
extension to
because
the park.
there's a small portion where they can put a few. The developer believes they can put a few areas, so they are a few with housing units. So there is just a little bit, but the majority of it's a pond, and it's not going to be used as housing. So
Ted, remind me to also, didn't the bike ped plan somehow tie into this location?
you're getting ahead of me. Yeah. So not. That's an ands. But yeah, this is where our. Can you put back presentation? Thank you. This is where the whole bike ped plan across our whole city ends. Is this park right here? So you'll be able to bike from the rec center all the way to this park.
Essentially, that path that's going south could connect to it, or something.
Yeah,
something to
there's
that effect.
This may be a silly question, but does each neighborhood park need to be unique? Would we benefit from like having a typical design for what a neighborhood park should look like, so that we don't have to design and engineer and pay for that from scratch every time the city's going to put in a new neighborhood park?
You mean like Pizza Hut?
Yeah, right.
My initial thought is every site's going to be different. So there's going to be some level of civil engineering involvement that's
Yeah.
going to be unique to every site. Utilities,
You'll have to do
grading,
utilities
curb,
and grading and stuff, but in
parking.
terms of like designing, this is the
Yeah, yeah.
playground equipment, this is how you lay it out. You might
the template.
twist it and move
Right.
it around on the site, but I'm thinking about the park widget that you could
Right.
drag and drop onto the properly graded canvas.
Right.
How much do people drive around to different neighborhood parks because they're different versus just use the park that's in their neighborhood? I'm just thinking out loud how much value is there in that, and thought I'd
I'm
throw the
thinking
question
that would only be for something unique like the basketball court or the volleyball court or the disc golf park is the unique feature that would take people to those areas.
Right.
And I kind of agree with
Differentiation.
you. I think we should be able to take the same equipment we were going to put at Eagle Lake and drop it over there for the same cost. it's going to be just as fun to the kids there as it is over in Eagle Lake. It's either good or it's not good.
Ted, when you say just get started, are you talking about like have very minimal parking initially? We're gonna need some parking over there because of where it's located, right?
Yeah,
initially?
we're gonna need parking over there, and that's you can kind of see it right there in the lots 16 and 15. I can highlight it.
So Ted, you threw out that 300,000 number. I assume that's bare bones, kind of what Eagle Lake's going to have, plus the cost we think it'll take to kind of get it prepared to put that on it.
Yeah, 300 would be a little less. Would be this design with a little bit of less because this design's about 300,000, but that doesn't include the grading and the parking lot.
Probably another 100
So,
plus thousand.
Yeah. So that's probably another 100. So
Probably
we'd probably have to
one
cut
of
this
those-
design by 100,000.
But I mean, the area's there, right? We won't have the equipment yet. It could be added later.
Correct.
Just like the sports court on one side, just like the soccer field. Those are amenities that could grow into the park over 10, 15 years.
And that's where I see this project as. We just need to
something
get the
started.
ball rolling, get some traction, and then continue to grow it as the neighborhood grows around it. But right now, there's a sufficient amount of houses over there that we probably need to service that east side of our city.
And since
And really, the main discussion is our CIP. This is where these funds are going to come from, and we're projected in 2024 with about 1.5. Of course, everyone knows we're starting budget season. We're going to talk rec. We're going to talk a lot of different areas. However, the good thing is all we have is very large projects in our CIP that new rec buildings, new parks, new public works facility, new upgrades to City Hall. I know we discussed that in January, but I kind of put a pause on that until we really know where we're at, and I want that to kind of run through the budget season before we start making huge changes at City Hall. We need to know where we're at. So my recommendation would be about $300,000 that we could use to build a starter park over there. Let me go out and get bids. The problem with saying that is I don't really want to tell anybody that, you just want to try to get in that ballpark with the bids we receive to do the work. But I guess you could and judge the companies based on what they can do for that. And that would be my strategy. However, there's downsides to that strategy of giving them a dollar amount, but they maybe require a rendering of what it's going to look like and all that good stuff.
Ted, thinking of funding. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Thinking of funding, we talked about grants. We've talked about how Andrew donated part of this. We're talking about what we want to start with. Are there any other funding mechanisms? Like, I guess I start thinking about special assessments. I know that this isn't something that special assessments could cover, but is there some other funding mechanism that we're missing that we could consider for this or any future park or public space?
I mean, I'd have to do some research on it.
Because, I mean, this is benefiting.
The problem
a lot
is
in that-
commercial. You have commercial around something. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. Kind of like our design across the street. When you have commercials to support that.
TIF or some
CID.
other-
CID is like a small TIF.
Right.
So that's what I keep thinking of. Those types of districts you can set up. However, with just strictly residential, there's not a lot of options. And truthfully, that's kind of what our property taxes pay for is park and recreation,
Right.
streets, police.
I think some places
all these
do a
types of things.
dedicated percentage of the sales tax to
Yep.
fund parks.
for
I've
special
seen that
project
done, or
stuff.
or just for ongoing, well, we're going to do a 0.5 sales tax and every bit of that just goes into the park fund and that's how we pay for parks. But Ted's comment's right. Like our property taxes should be sufficient to fund.
Makes it hard.
Parks.
when we have-
No, I don't disagree. I just wanted to open up the conversation, make sure
Yeah.
we're not missing something.
It makes it real hard when you have neighbors like Derby and Andover and Mays that have all these sales tax revenues for their recs and rec commissions and parks. I mean, Derby's putting millions of dollars in park every year. It's sales tax revenue. We don't have that.
I have seen private funding. I've seen a big John Deere park.
Right.
You know,
I've seen
Get the
that too.
right business to sponsor it.
And I imagine
Future
myself knocking
opportunities
on
there.
doors in the future, but let me put out a few
Maybe we'll get
fires
the
first.
Integra Park.
Maybe one day we'll be that. We're not there yet.
And we've
okay.
we've
Put your
tried
name on
That's
it.
fine.
we've tried the sales tax route, and that's always sitting there. We don't have a sales tax right now, and with Amazon and those types of companies, and it could generate $600,000-700,000 a year. But I don't know if this is the time, but that is something, because your question is there other revenue sources, and Brian's right, that's what a lot of other communities choose to do. But
And for the record, I brought that up, but that I do not support that.
no, I
What, a
just
sales tax? Oh, I was gonna say in the past, the sales tax wasn't a big enough number to worry about. Sounds like it's starting to get there.
it's starting to
though.
get there with
Well, the
the
online retail.
online internet sales. Yeah.
And just to throw this out here, since we just had the discussion, is the volleyball court an option out there since it's inexpensive and we maybe want to start bare bones? It's an amenity out there that's not expensive.
I mean, we can throw anything at it.
You'd still want to play.
My only problem with volleyball courts, and I don't know, I like one, but we spend a lot of operations and maintenance on those types of things. That's another. It just seems in the past a lot of beekeepers have been called in my 8 years here. It's kind of funny, and maybe we won't have that problem at a new location, but I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but there's a lot of cleaning and stuff that goes on.
Bees are in every park. Everywhere we have sand, we have bees every year.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I think, I guess, if I bring you some proposals for a standard park about around that 300 type, that's something we're looking at. Is that palatable? I guess so.
So I'm not clear where that budget is. Is that in the budget for this year, or are you looking at for something for 2025 budget?
So it would be in our capital improvement budget, which is non-budgeted. So it'd be
This-
addition to
Okay.
and really we've and we can go over that real quick. Skyview Park's been in there since 2022.
Right.
But it's been a to be determined, and that's what we're doing here tonight is trying to determine that amount. HVAC phase 2, we just completing phase 1. I'm wanting to collect some more data, so give you guys some more informed decisions, and that's kind of how that plan's working. And then City Hall project, like I talked about, I kind of want that to be put in through the budget cycle to see where that falls in priorities before we set a dollar amount. And I know keyless entry is another big one, and started the project. There's a lot of different variables that goes on, but the good news is as we get deeper and deeper into the ERP system, the keyless entry and the ERP system can talk. And so we're still exploring that options as well. So I think us waiting a little bit on that might benefit us in the long run with time cards and that sort of thing. So that's still in the works, but really a lot of the projects we have is improvement parks, big street improvements, those types of things. So hitting this fund with 300,000 is not going to deter it. I mean, it's been part of the fund for many last 2 years, but it just hasn't been put in a dollar number to.
So and the types is a little bit small, but am I
Sorry.
reading this right? The available funds is 3.1 million and the estimated expenditures of 1.6 million. Is that the right numbers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the ones on top are the ones already been approved, so they're encumbered. So I make sure that so the ones at top is basically our microsurfacing for all of our engineering services for 45th Street, ERP system that we approved last year. So these are all expenditures that we haven't got bills, but I have to encumber those funds so that we don't
So
spend them.
we have about 1.5 million available.
Exactly.
Okay.
That was what we ended with, and pretty much a clean slate next year. So we'll be planning a lot during the budget season, what we're going to do with this fund over the next 5 years, how much we're going to fund it, and what we're going to expense. Okay.
Does that give you enough
It did. It
confusion to
did.
go
And
with it.
I'm glad to have the frank conversations with everybody so that now we can go out for bid and have some results for you. The problem with going out with no real dollar amount or no real understanding is we just do what we did today, but with inconveniencing a lot of companies because I don't know if I don't like putting together proposals that aren't seriously considered. So now we can define what we want. So
Yeah.
that'll make
Good.
relations happier. Ann, you want to go next?
All right, well, Ted asked me to come give everybody kind of a refresher course on the WIMPO funding process.
Fine.
So we've got just kind of going from the very beginning, the biggest overarching product of WAMPO is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It is a long-range plan. It looks out over the next 20 years. But the plan is updated every 5 years. So it's kind of a 5-year reoccurring plan. It does set the vision and strategy for all regional transportation decision-making. If it's not listed in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, it's not going to happen. So if any funding happens, it's going to come through this plan in the region. They even ask KDOT, hey, if you've got any large projects that are going to be going on, it needs to be in this plan. Not that those KDOT projects are going to take away funding from the other stuff, but it just needs to be included in there. That's part of the federal requirements. And then we have the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. It's another small, the short-term plan. It's a 5-year look ahead, but updated every 2 years. So that's kind of, this sets the funding priorities, and this is what obligates is a difficult word, but this is what kind of tells communities with some assurance that yes, you will be getting funds for this project in this year. It's updated all the time. I think we're on TIP Amendment 7 or 8 in this
7
funding
today.
cycle. So
It was 7 today.
okay. So yeah, I mean, it gets updated all the time. It's if a community decides that, hey, I was going to do this project, but for whatever reason, I cannot do it, then the TIP gets updated as the engineers are going through and designing the project. We have updated cost estimates that updates the TIP. It's just kind of a fluctuating thing, but in order to get on the TIP, it's got to be in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan first. The current TIP covers the years 2023 to 2026. The upcoming TIP that I'm working on with WAMPO right now covers the years 2025 through 2028. So the years 2025 and 2026 are pretty much all encumbered in that previous TIP. So we're really looking at the years 27 and 28 for funding wise.
So just to clarify, these years she's giving you our federal fiscal years. So they start October 1
Correct.
and end September 30th.
Correct.
They're not calendar years.
So the current status, WAMPO's in the process of reviewing applications for inclusion in the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the next Transportation Improvement Plan. The city submitted applications for 11 projects, with 45th Street from Oliver to Woodlawn being our top priority. And it's always, because it's got to be in the MTP in order to get funded, my strategy is to throw everything out there and see what hits the wall. Because in the last cycle, we had Rock Road as our top priority, but the other folks on the committee thought that 45th Street was a better project because it's already developed. It's got more need according to what they foresaw and kind of what their experience is. Any funding we get is a good thing. So, we just, instead of trying to put all of our eggs in one or two baskets, I'd rather kind of spread the net and see what we get. But these projects are ones, I do have them listed in order of what the council had decided at a couple months ago when we had met. So the TIP funding programs, there's 4 main programs. There's the transportation alternatives. Oh, whoops. Oh, Ted, you didn't tell me that you were doing that. Okay, so this is the slide that kind of shows both council and the public kind of where the projects would be located. The ones in green, the Woodlawn, obviously not completed, but we're in progress. And then up north in the 53rd, that is in progress as well. And then the orange, the 45th is under design. The purple is the proposed construction that we have in the asked for funding. And then the blue would be the bike ped that we've asked for funding as well. So now on to the funding programs. There's 4 main programs: transportation alternatives, TA funding. That is primarily like hike and bike paths. I believe there is like transportation such as like buses and shared use rides in there as well. That is kind of the highest program. Anything that is eligible for TA funding is eligible for everything else. But something that is eligible for STBG, the Surface Development Block Grant only, cannot get any of those other programs. So that's why I've got it listed at the top, because if it's eligible for that, it's eligible for everything. The carbon reduction mitigation program and congestion mitigation air quality, those are, you can use them for streets, but those are more like, I think we've got the CRP funding for the hike and bike path along 53rd Street. So these are also kind of transportation alternatives, things that you're trying to get people off of cars or helping to a turn lane that will help move cars a little bit more, not just your standard street. And then the Surface Transportation Block Grant, the STBG, that's for just like everything. I mean, it falls in. Woodlawn is STBG funds. As we have been working through these, KDOT has asked us to make sure that any project that we're programming for the new cycle is, they'd like to keep it like all one group of funding. They don't want to mix funding pots. Like the example that was used is a turn lane on a road. So 45th Street, we've got several turn lanes in there. Those would qualify for the CRP and CMAQ funding, but KDOT has requested, please don't do that, because when they're processing pay applications, when they're then billing the feds for the reimbursement of the funds, I don't know where this 100 yards of concrete went. I don't know if it went to the turn lane or if it went to the street. So they've asked us to be kind of careful of how those are programmed in and don't split. Like if a bike path is very easy, a bike path on the side of Woodlawn is very easy and it's kind of separate, but not a turn lane. So it's a little bit different.
So related to that, then the roundabout at 45th and Oliver would actually be a good carbon reduction program,
That could be, yes.
even though the rest of that project is not really.
Correct. And I'm not sure how KDOT would view that unless it was separated out.
Well, they were separate projects at one time, but sometimes,
Correct.
at some point they became combined. So
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they were separate projects, and that's something that I can certainly bring up with the project selection committee as we're working through things as we get further meetings. Is, you know, hey, we're willing to break it up if you give us money. So I mean, it's always, it's what? Yeah. Yep. And that's, as long as KDOT's willing to work with us, and yeah, you know, it's called out of the box thinking, you know, just what's non-standard ways can we do that still makes sense, that's not going to overburden the city or cause a lot of extra work.
Okay.
And then hopefully this is somewhat big enough that you guys can see. This is the funding table that we received at the WAMPO Project Selection Committee meeting. So it gives an idea of how much funding is available in each of the buckets. And our 45th Street project is running about $10 million, 10 to 11. That's almost that's more than WAMPO gets for their STBG funding in a year. So that's why Ted and I have been talking a lot, and we're trying to get a little creative for how this is going to be funded, because I can tell you it's not going to happen with the city getting all of the STBG funding available for a year. So this is kind of setting the stage for the next slide. Advanced construction. I know we've thrown this term out quite a bit recently, but I did verify with KDOT that my recollection of previous discussions are correct. So with advanced construction, the city would front the entire cost of construction. With Woodlawn, it was bid at what, $8.5 million. The city would write a check to KDOT after the bids come in. When we decide to award the project, the city would write a check to KDOT for that entire project cost. And then KDOT would administer the project and take it from there. With that said, reimbursement will occur as a project is programmed in the TIP. So we can, if we've got, say, $10,000 available in 2026, we can program 45th Street for $10,000 in 2026. We could program it for $5 million in 2027 and the remainder in 28, just as a way to split it up. That allows the project selection committee to not use the entire year's STBG funding for Bel Aire. It allows them to spread it out a little bit more. It allows the optics a little bit nicer. So, hey, Bel Aire's not just getting 100% of this. They're 9,000 bedroom community. How regionally significant is this? These are all questions that we kind of have to work through and talk about. It's the optics, it's sharing it throughout the region. So advanced construction is a way to do that. I've currently mentioned to the committee that we would be willing to do a 2 to 3 year spread. 3 years is the time of our temp notes. And Ted's very comfortable with being able to spread it that long, and then at the end of the 3 years, you're done with construction. You know how much the funding is going to be, and then you can shift it into permanent financing. So it's really a tool to allow for the funding of different projects. It's a tool that's mostly used by Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita because they're able to float the funds. And I'm not sure if smaller communities just haven't thought about the possibility of using temp notes to finance it. I don't know where folks are coming from, but in looking in Bel Aire, that's certainly an opportunity. They were asking, why are your projects so expensive? And I'm like, I don't know. I've been asking that too. So they've asked me to get a more detailed construction estimate at the next meeting, which is April 26th. So I think a lot of it has to do with the storm sewer and the boxes that are underneath the roadway, that it's just, we're generally taking a mile of roadway and going one way or the other. And then it's also inflation. We learned through Woodlawn cover CYA.
Are the projects in other communities doing something different for storm sewer?
I'm not really sure. I haven't looked into them that closely, but I'm seeing them like 6 or 7 million. I'm not seeing the 10 to 11. So I'm not sure if it's just that our financing assistance, PEC and others that have helped us prepare these cost estimates are just padding it a little higher than normal. I'm not sure. I've been told storm sewer is high, but I'm really not. I haven't delved into it enough. I haven't had the time to really look into it, but I'm going to take the cost estimate to the next meeting and get their opinions. I think part of it too, as I said, please don't estimate low, because Woodlawn, we estimated low and we got burned because the project came in so much higher, and we're stuck carrying a lot of that ourselves because
extra
we're
$1 million.
capped at that 80%. Once it bids, I can't get any more than that. We tried.
Yeah.
And they said no. So I would rather estimate on the high side and be able to cover our costs, but I'm not really sure where these others are coming in, but that is definitely something that I'm kind of keeping a heads up for.
Just a refresher, what happened on Woodlawn is we had an engineering estimate at, I don't know the exact number, but let's just say it was $10 million. And from the engineering estimate, a year later, KDOT went and did their contract bid a year later, and it was 11 million. So we had to float the extra $1 million. It was out of our pocket. So we didn't get 80% funding because of that. these numbers that you've put up there, though, those are the 80% values that they would contribute. You still have to do your 20% on top of those, right?
Correct.
So those buckets that you showed, each of those is an 80% bucket.
Yeah, each of that's what WAMPO has that would fund the 80% of the project.
The
The city
additional
would still
20%
be,
is added to that to get the
that is
project
correct.
cost.
Yes. And
I am surprised at how low those total buckets are
Yeah.
for
right.
the whole region. 'cause
Yeah,
that
for
won't even cover 2 miles of roadway for
Yeah.
the entire region per
exactly.
year.
So what happens is, and you probably know more about this than I do, but I do know that other funds pop up all the time, and it's like, oh, there's an opportunity to plug this there or that's what we would understood was going to happen with 45th Street, but it never materialized.
There just wasn't enough left over, and we could not get that guarantee. This year, we've got that good opportunity where we can plug in $10,000 for 26 and then plug in a bunch for 27 and then a bunch for 28 and get it funded. And that way, when opportunities do come up, when there's a project that somebody just can't do or gets delayed or whatever, those funds can get moved to Woodlawn, and that reimbursement can occur sooner. As long as the funds have been expended, the project has been constructed to a point that those funds have been expended.
Yeah.
And the Redbud Trail is a perfect example. I mean, Wichita's got that going. We keep moving funds to Redbud because it is going. It is very expensive, and it is something that can take all the funds because it's a TA project.
I mean, for example, like the East Kellogg, hundreds of millions of dollars of project, that's a state project. That's not coming out of WAMPO's bucket. The state is prioritizing that project, and so a vast majority of the funding is state related. This is just the bucket and the local metro has to manage.
Yes.
There's a lot of other federal funding that flows through the state.
Okay.
So
And
they
Wichita
just have
does.
to be regionally significant projects to make it far enough to sort of catch everybody's attention.
And Wichita comes out of this bucket too. They don't ask for everything.
Yeah.
They're doing a bunch of ITS projects that they've asked for that are coming out of the TA funds. There's sidewalks that are coming out of the TA funds. And some of it, we were looking at a project, I believe in Hayesville, and the concern was, is this really truly regionally significant? Because how many people are going to be from, let's say, Bel Aire are going to be going and walking on this mile of sidewalk in Hayesville? And it's like, well, the same thing can be said about our mile of sidewalk on 53rd. And sometimes you just have to give in order to get, and just make sure you're spreading the funds around regionally, looking out for yourself, but also making sure that the map is somewhat evenly dotted with funds being received.
I just had a question, not on the funding side, but just on the construction side. Is Bel Aire in a weird spot that our projects are never teeny tiny where they're going to be quick, but they're not gigantic projects where you can, maybe command a lot of bids? Like, are we in a weird spot just in terms of the size of our projects, or you have an opinion on that?
We've been struggling a little bit with bidders recently, and I think some of that is due to companies combining. And then our projects are a little bit, they're kind of in that size. They're not large enough to attract some of the really big folks that bid on a lot of KDOT projects, but they're not small enough that we can go get like Pave the Way. It's just a commercial I heard on the radio coming in. It's PPJ has done a lot, but they don't really do like the 53rd Street project. So it's kind of that niche firm. And then if they bid on a lot of KDOT projects, they may or may not have room to be able to fit us in with the time schedule that we've provided. I try and be as open as I can when bidding projects out. Obviously with 53rd, there was, some definite concerns as far as timing goes, and we put that in. Whenever you limit contractors, prices usually tend to go up because they have a very limited time to get stuff done. But yeah, it's just odd because like on the patchwork that we did a couple years ago, I think we had 2 bidders on that. And I'm not sure if it's just that there's not the companies out there that are doing that work or what. It's kind of confusing.
So if we went did you have other slides there?
No, that's it.
So if we went with advanced construction, what's your feel of the reception of the staff at WAMPO and
That's
the
probably going to be
committee?
the only way that we get it funded unless the city is willing to go to accept 60% funding, or a smaller amount. And that was one of the questions that I was asked that we didn't have time to answer because folks left. But would the city be willing to accept less than 80%? It's always been the goal of the project selection committee is to come back and fully fund projects to that 80%. It depends on funds available. And it's really a juggling game. You have a bucket full of this much dollars and you're trying to fund everything equally. So I can get 3 projects funded and I have 500,000 left over, but I don't have any projects that can take 500,000. So do I take a project that's 800,000 and reduce everybody's funding from the 80% to 75%? That's kind of how those quote unquote games are played when we're trying to balance everything out. And now that in past years, we've just picked the list of projects and let WAMPO staff sort out the buckets. And now they're asking the project selection committee to fill the buckets as we're going through picking the projects, which I understand it makes a lot more sense. It's you really knowing the restraints and KDOT's requests, you have to kind of help them out and figure out which projects which, because if we choose road projects that are $12 million and we don't have the funding for that, then we can't use all $12 million for road projects.
So one of the things that we do or have done, at least with Woodlawn, and I know the design of 45th put those box storm sewers in. But if we stayed with ditches, even paved ditches, if that makes sense, and I don't know if it does or doesn't, I don't have an opinion on that. If we stayed with those, wouldn't that reduce those costs significantly? And what would that look like? I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Whenever you institute a ditch, and it's usually the paved ditches are for low slopes, so you usually want 1% to 2% for a grass bottom ditch. 2 is more preferable, so you don't have water puddling.
Mhm.
The paved bottoms go when it's 0.5% or less. We've got some that are 0.2%, which is virtually flat.
Right.
But the concrete ditch liners allow the water to go through without a significant amount of puddling. Whenever you've got the open ditches, it limits what you can do on the surface. So if you still want to have sidewalks, you just added probably another 15 to 20 feet of right of way. And in right of ways that are already constrained, like 45th Street, there may not be room for that. And then you get into other issues, adding retaining walls to make sure that you've got correct slopes and fencing, which also add up too.
That was one comment actually I was going to make earlier, and I meant to say it. Some of the communities that you're seeing those projects built in are ones that are growing and they're building new roads going out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not having to rebuild a road in a developed corridor. So they may have the opportunity to do ditch drainage versus a big box, or it's just hard. You can't compare yourself too much to another community because the engineering, each project is going to be its own thing, but they have the advantage if you're growing out to keep ditch drainage, to do a 3-lane. Now, when they go to a 5-lane in the future, they're going to be in the same situation. They've acquired right away and then they have to go underground, but
And even then,
sort of the trade-offs.
Yeah, they may be stuck because I know some of those ditches over in Mays, those are very shallow.
Right.
And being able to get a box that will fit under there, and it's going to have to be pretty darn wide to carry the drainage that you need. So it's as Tyler said, it's definitely a trade-off.
Some of those decisions could hurt later if
Mhm.
you chose to do that now to
Yeah.
save, $3 or $4 million now. It could end up costing you $10 million later, whatever the
Mhm.
number is. But yeah, I had the same thought on some of the roads. I don't know that 45th is a good opportunity, but as we consider other roads, like we did 53rd, which was, well, we can afford $1.5 million. We can't afford a $10 million road on 53rd. But as we continue to look at roads that are sort of more on the growth, is there an opportunity to think more of a map design versus again, trade-offs? because you don't know how soon you're gonna have to rebuild that road, but.
And if Integra comes, Rock Road's a good opportunity because there's not a whole lot of turning movements. You go in and you're going to turn at Integra. There's not driveways, there's not other intersecting roads that are coming along that stretch, say from 53rd up to the highway. There's just not a lot of intersecting roads. The reason you put the turn lanes in the center and the edges to get the people off, so they've got somewhere to go as they're slowing down to turn, and they're not clogging up the main travel ways. So there's opportunities there. It's something that we'll definitely be looking at in the future if Integra does decide to build where they've announced.
So is there a possibility? I know engineering is about to wrap up on 45th, next couple months. If I understood, it was May, right? The estimate was May timeframe.
Yeah, I think they're going to try and get probably towards the end of May, try and get it up to KDOT for review.
So, and we're looking at probably about a year for KDOT's review. So that means May of 2025, we're ready to go for construction bids. Is there a possibility to do that and get it out and get it going with an advanced construction concept in 25?
What I want to make sure that we do is I want to make sure that we've got as much of that project funded as we can within that tip, because if we don't, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
So we can do the advanced construction with $10,000 funded, with $5 million funded. There's no guarantee we're getting that additional 5 million. Once that project is obligated, once that agreement is signed with KDOT, we're not getting extra money. That's the problem that even with advanced construction, because that agreement with KDOT sets that maximum federal funding. So once we're there, we can't get more funds. So I want to make sure that we're programmed in for the maximum that we can get, even if it's 4 years down the road. I want to make sure that as much of this project is funded until we go and we get that obligation. Woodlawn, we obligated, we couldn't get any more money.
Right. So just to make sure we're on the same page, what you just said. So if I hear you right, you're saying, in theory, we could go on and do the bid letting in 25, as long as we have the agreements in place for a 3-year or 4-year advanced construction repayment. And we know what those dollars are in those buckets for each year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And those buckets, the number of dollars in each year's bucket could change.
Could change, yeah.
But we know that, say they program us at $10 million over 3 years. That $10 million gets put into the KDOT contract as the maximum federal participation in the project. We're not getting $10,105. We're getting $10 million.
Right, that's all you're going to get.
So,
once you obligate, you're done.
So I just want to make sure that we're kind of as safe as we can be, unless the council, finds $5-10 million just sitting around, which we have a lot of other things that I'd rather do. But, I want to make sure that we're covered for as much money as we can possibly get out of this.
But and that would be the 80%.
Correct.
Yeah. And is there any possibility of going over the 80%?
No.
So as long as we know 80% is coming the next day. So,
Yeah.
And what is just knowing that Wichita and Sedgwick County are the only two in the area that are doing advanced construction, what is your feel for the possibility of us, say Wichita and Sedgwick County, they're always going to have preference, I'm guessing, because of their projects?
Not necessarily.
But they're the ones that have done advanced construction.
Correct.
So I'm coming at it from a bias, a little bit of a bias. What kind of liability do we have if we do agree to do advanced construction and they change their mind? Is there any, before the agreement is signed, but we're sort of committing to the process, what do we do then? What is our next step if that were to happen? We don't get advanced construction. What do you see happening from that point?
So if the council does not want to move forward with advanced construction, then we say, I need to have a dollar figure from the council. We're willing to move forward if WAMPO can give us $6 million. We're willing to move forward if WAMPO can give us $7 million. I need kind of that minimum level that the city's willing to move forward with if we don't want to do advanced construction.
Tyler,
I-
are you concerned that maybe we like think we're going to get advanced construction and we agree to that, and then next year when it comes time to pay out
And then we
the
can't
money
fund
we
the
thought we were going
difference.
to get, what we don't get paid? Is that
More my concern is if we're approaching this from we have to have 80% to make it go forward, and for some reason in 2 years we figure out no, we're not going to get 80%, we're going to get 50. How do we reconcile that if we've already committed? Obviously, we're already under design. In a year, KDOT's going to have it approved. We'd love to have it under construction just as soon as we can after that, but I assume what you're saying is the agreement's already be signed and they're obligated. We're both obligated to it at that point financially and moving it forward. Doesn't sound like you're really that concerned. I'm just thinking from the standpoint of no other community's done it. Why? Have they run into the battle where they figure out they're not going to beat Wichita and Sedgwick County on the advanced construction and it's a pipe dream like we shouldn't even be going down? Or what is the real reason?
I guess it's more of the banking capacity, the financing capacity to be able to front that money. Ted's got a lot of experience with temporary notes and bonding, and I'm not sure, Ted, if you can speak to whether other communities use that or not, and kind of, I don't know if you have experience on how they finance stuff, but I think that's more of the question, is being able to float those costs and not significantly affect their budget, and being willing to push the payment a little bit,
well,
3 years down the road
and
instead of
also if other
further.
communities aren't submitting as big a projects as we are, as they pointed out to us, then their need to do those advanced construction things is going to be lower. Sounds like we're an outlier in the big dollar projects that we're submitting, and maybe closer to the projects that Sedgwick County and Wichita are submitting. And that, in my mind, that could be a reason.
Sure. I'm just a little concerned because there's other things that we're having to tackle over the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm concerned that maybe that isn't the route to go. That maybe that would be over committing ourselves.
But you're saying that maybe they renege on an agreement, but these are signed contracts we're talking about. These aren't things that you can back away from and not do because you sign a contract.
If we don't get the advanced construction, what are we talking? Are we talking about just delaying the project 2-3 years? Like, that's my question. What is the next step if we
Yeah.
don't get advanced construction?
Oh, if they don't agree to a contract.
Because I think there's
advanced construction.
other priorities
If
we're
they-
having to contend with that
Yeah.
could be sizable
So
numbers that we're
if-
having to float or figure out.
If WAMPO would not agree to putting
Right.
45th Street in 3 years with, however it's separated out.
It kind of feels like we're hanging our
What's-
hat on that right now, and I don't know if that's going to happen. So, what's the next option?
The next option is we wait because we can't afford a $12 million road.
And that's what I'm getting at. That
Mhm.
the next step for everybody that's listening to the public, that would delay the project.
I think then we're probably going to need to look at some more temporary patch
Options.
options.
Yep.
For
Yeah.
mill and overlay type things.
Well,
Sorry, I'm sorry if I wasn't
no.
being clear. I was
I'll
trying to
take you
get to
back. I
the.
asked
That's
if we
the
could just
alternative.
Pull the asphalt out and redo the asphalt, and nobody wanted to do that then, and that was $1.5 million, $2 million job.
Right.
Yeah.
But that could get us 20 years down the road, and which would get us past our major financial hurdle of our land debt.
I mean, I'm excited if we can figure out the advanced construction. I'm just also thinking, what are the
Right.
citizens going to think when we don't get that? It's going to be a
Sure.
delay. So.
And I can tell you that WAMPO really tries to push advanced construction because it allows for so much flexibility in programming. The mayor, you've sat in on how many meetings where they're like, well, we have this number of dollars left over for the year. What are we going to do with it?
Yep.
If you've got advanced construction projects, it is so easy to say, hey, let's
Put it in there.
just shift this to that project. Problem solved. There's no discussion.
Sort of at the top of the next list.
Exactly.
And
So-
my
so
guess is,
I'm very comfortable that if we're willing to do that, then this project is going to get funded, and we're not going to have an issue with it. It's just kind of how it's split up between the different buckets.
Gotcha.
my guess is, and talking with other communities, and I don't know this, that they all do this, but this temporary note thing that Ted does is kind of unique to us. A lot of communities don't seem to understand how to do that or what to do with that. When I've talked with folks about that idea, it's kind of like, oh, I don't have any idea what that's about. So it does put you in an interesting financial position in that when you think bonds, oh, I'm obligated for 20 years with this, and I can't afford to go do that in advanced construction. That just doesn't make sense. Okay. Because now when I get those payments, I got to hold them in an escrow account to pay the bonds out.
Ted, is it kind of like a construction loan to build your house and then you convert it into a permanent mortgage, more or less? Is that the comparison to what you're doing?
In a sense, I mean, this is I want to kind of see where this comes out, because there's multiple ways we can go about this. We could do a traditional temporary note where we'll pay, 4% for the 3 years of grace, but we also have the flexibility of some other funds available. We could almost purchase our own temp note with it as well. So that's another innovative design we could use. I'd have to flesh that all out, but I think that seems in the ballpark as well. So I think that's, along with the cost and other areas, and I'll really drill down on why other communities don't do it. I think we've touched along the areas. However, it seems to be, Sedgwick County and Wichita are pretty smart by doing it this way. And I don't see, with the flexibility we have and the growth we have, and a lot of these decisions are vision type questions, is do we want underground sewer or open ditch? Do we want to build a quality city or just keep going? And we're going to have to be flexible over the next 5 to 10 years and agile, I guess. And this is the type of way we can get these projects on, because if you look at our map, every major road in our city is going to need one of these issues. So we better get comfortable with some of this type of stuff. And John's right too, is 2034 can come soon enough, then we can really be flexible with a lot of things.
So when would you need to know for the advanced construction route what our minimum is that we would want WAMPO to lock in on total? You said that we would need to give them like 6-7 million. When do you need that limit from us?
Our next meeting is April 26th, and the next discussion is 45th. We started talking about that at our meeting last week, but didn't get very far because folks had to leave. But that would be kind of when I would need to have an idea. Ted Berry and myself have been talking a little bit internally, just what we can float, but having council direction would be helpful.
So do you have any updates from Garver on what the costs are today or soon?
No,
Can you give
they're
us-
actually this week, they're working on putting together a cost estimate with as far as they've gotten at this point on the plans. So-
That's, I know it's going to be an estimate today, but that's
Correct.
a baseline we're going
Yes.
to have here.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Okay.
So as soon as I get that, I'll forward it to Ted and he can send it out to the rest of the
If we
council.
have to take on $12 million, is that going to hurt our credit rating and cause us to pay higher interest?
I mean, that would be
Whatever the amount is.
that would be the other kind of issue with doing something like that. But the best part is you have a rating agency. It's not just a formula, and you can explain the process and when we're going to get repaid. So I don't think our credit ratings is necessarily going to tank.
That's kind of what I'm asking.
I grew it. I grew at a point. So if it goes back down a little point, it's not going to kill us. But that's something I'll investigate with Adam, our financial advisor, to make sure he's aware of what we're doing. But they're smart enough to, I mean, just like the reason they raised our credits, I showed them every development we got going on. It's like, okay, the city in the next 10 years is going to grow. So we're going to give them better credit rating. The opposite's true as well. Okay, we're taking out this, but we're at a guarantee contract to be refunded in the next 2 years. They see that as well. So it's not a stagnant formula they use. It's a bunch of humans looking at us as well.
Any other questions for Ann concerning 45th Street?
Do we need to come up with a number tonight or within a week, or what do we need to?
No, this was just more information. I'm trying to use these workshops a little bit more to preemptively, kind of like our first presentation. We're going to hear the resolution next Tuesday, you have more understanding of things. So as we continue through this WAMPO project, I'll give you updates and we'll update you on where we're at. So now you're prepared to make a quality decision, not trying to do it on the bench at the night of.
Throw out a rough number that if it's going to cost more than $3 million out of our pockets in the end,
For the
that maybe
for the
we shouldn't be
20%.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as Ann gets the final estimate, I'll present it or I'll give it to you and let you know.
And we can certainly discuss it at the next meeting,
Mhm.
just a little bit more in depth, because I should have the information by that time.
Okay, very good.
Thank
Any other questions or concerns with this issue? All right, thank you. How much time will you want and say? You said if
No,
time
well,
allows-
I think we can do that next. I might be able to send it as an attached file. It might be easier for, I don't want to go through a 10-minute video right now, but we can. I'll try to slice it up a little bit better so you can see. It's kind of rudimentary right now.
Very good. All right. All right. Anything else we need to chat about tonight?
I have one thing if no one else
Okay.
does. So part of me stepping in, I'm trying to review some processes, and in our financial policy, I'm allowed a $10,000 expenditure limit, but I found something as we go through backflow process. And I remember the conversation very clearly. You know, we set all the limits, but then I think we just kind of said, all right, and then a $5 filing fee to be applied to each permit that gets turned in. And what I found out is a lot like the U.S. Treasury's doing is it's costing them more to create pennies and nickels than it is that they're actually worth.
Filing
And-
fee is not paying for the cost of filing.
Filing fee is not
document.
paying for the cost of my staff to collect all the invoice the company, get it back. So I'm just going to waive that fee this year, and then we'll readdress it in the fee schedule. But I just wanted to let you guys know what I'm going to do this year. If you have major concerns, I can bring it up. But I see it as a common sense approach to administering a quality program.
I used to do similar things. If the bill was $2, we just wrote that off. I'm not sending out a bill for $2.
Cost 60 some cents just for the stamp.
You just made a lot of my staff very happy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. I appreciate that update. And anything else? If not, I'll call us adjourned and see everybody in a week for regular council meeting. Have a good week.